Hello, everybody. Welcome back to NRL Nostradamus, where I'm joined once again by co-host Dicko. How are you, mate?
Diz, I'm fantastic. How you going, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Doing another review this week before we briefly preview Fiji versus Cook Islands and Australia versus New Zealand. The next three teams off the rank are the Titans, the Warriors, and the Broncos. But Dicko, before we get stuck in, let's shout out one of our major sponsors, Grip Socks. Step into excellence with every stride from the heart Australia to your feet. That's GRIPZ Use our code NOSTRA20 for a whopping discount at checkout. All right, Dicko, the Gold Coast Titans coming in 14th place, had a bit of a mixed bag of a year. Obviously, Tino Fasamulawi getting injured early on this season with his ACL, currently over in the US in Philadelphia, working on some of the plyometric movements they're required to bring him back into the best shape as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They only had 8 wins for the season, 16 losses, 4 home wins, 4 away wins. Who was your MVP for the Titans? Let's give them a little bit of a spruce up before we grill them.
All right. So my MVP was actually coming of age, Keanu Kinney. I thought
Arno Keeney, huge.
excellent season. I thought debuted halfway through the season, was it, or
Yeah.
did he get a couple of games early?
No, I think it was. He might have filled in a couple of games early there for Foreign or Jaden Campbell, but
But
yeah,
it shows the sign of a player when you come in and then your attack revolves around him effectively, because that's what it got to in towards the end of the season. Like they couldn't score points unless he had a hand in them. And I remember against the Broncos specifically, right at the end of the season, he was excellent.
yeah,
Um,
he ran for like what 200 odd meters every single game, pretty much multiple.
yeah,
He was everywhere.
and you're keeping AJ Brimson and Jaden Campbell out of that position, so I think he's got a big future. He for them, like if he didn't play towards the end of the season, I don't know how many more wins they would have gotten the first couple. To be honest, they would have finished a lot lower than what they actually did. I reckon.
Yeah, they could have almost finished the spoon, mate. I locked in Bo Fermor. I thought he had
Yeah,
an absolute cracker season. I believe he's a Queenslander as well, so
he is. He
maybe
is.
future Origin star there for the mighty Maroons. Still quite young. Obviously Keanu Keeney had a massive year, mate. He got
Mm.
Player of the Year for the Titans this season. Players player, bit of a surprise packet here. Who do you think players player got to, mate? I'm going to throw you on the spot here.
Player of a team I don't like. I'm going to go Kieran Foran.
Brian Kelly.
Wow.
So, I mean, look, I shouldn't laugh. Like the players have voted for this, right? So
Yeah. Okay.
he's obviously had an influence in some way, shape, or form. Obviously,
Yep.
it's off the field because on the field, I thought he was hopeless. I think he had the top 10 errors in the comp
Mm.
out of
Mm.
out of any player, and that's pretty embarrassing, really, for a center. But rookie of the year was actually Josiah Pahulu. So here's that young forward that came in to replace Jolliffe. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah. He
halfway through.
played well.
He actually did
Yep.
all right.
Yeah.
He definitely took a few back fence runs and was pretty influential. Now, before we go into a most improved player for the Titans, Dicko,
Hmm.
tell me who the biggest disappointment was for the Titans.
You're smirking at me, so I feel like you
Without
know where
saying
this is
David
going.
Fafita.
I, I mean, so what I've done, right, with my biggest disappointment, and I'll do this for every team that we review, is I've gone who promises in terms of talent the most, all
Yep,
right, who takes up a lot of the salary,
yep,
and then what did they produce for the season?
yep.
And I've come obviously to none other than the rampaging back rower, supposedly in David Fafita,
Mm,
one of the greatest downhill skiers I think we've ever seen.
yep,
I thought, as I said, from the money that he takes up on the cap, to the talent that he has, and we've all seen it in spurts, but the consistency is just not there. And I think we sort of highlighted it a few times with various videos that we put on our socials, and a couple of little lapses in concentration and effort.
Yep.
And for where you need to get to as a footballer to win premierships and be the best, you can't be making those mistakes. And I thought the writing was on the wall when he wasn't selected in State of Origin. He had that patch of form that was okay.
Yep.
And then he wasn't selected in Origin. And then, yeah, from that point on, I thought he fell away tremendously, to the point where I think a couple of games he might have even started on the bench or was reverted back to the bench. Yeah.
I thought he was gonna, sort of take that, use it as ammunition and sort of fight back for his spot. But
well, if you want to get 1.2 million this season, you got to give your team more than what he's consistently giving them. And I know he's a forward, so we're not going to see, tries and points and goals and whatever, it's setting up tries from him. But it's the 1%ers that you want to see. The not lazy back to second marker, or the kick chase. But those efforts, and it's why Billy didn't select him for Queensland, because they're not there of a player that's required to sort of play at that level.
100%. And honestly, David Fafita was my biggest disappointment as well. And I'll allude to more his attacking side of things. So he's always been a little bit, how you going defensively, and questioned around, a little bit of effort and commitment there. But, he was playing Origin only, a year or two ago. So,
yeah.
And doing quite well. Now, David Fafita did not have the same influence, or near the same influence, in attack either. So it wasn't just his defensive, I guess, mindset and fitness, which is a big thing for me, for David. And when you've got a young team or a team struggling to get results, you turn to big money, big name players. And if they're letting the team down, it has a bit of a ripple effect. And, proof's in the pudding there. We got Bo Famore, as my MVP on one side, and David Peter on the other side, just, promising the world and delivering.
And you also compare them. They're both back rowers, one left edge, one right edge, right? One is an all effort player, like an all effort player, right? And one is that X factor. So let's just say if David Fafita has the effort of, say, a Liam Martin, imagine the player that he could become.
Oh, huge, huge. I think someone just really needs to get in his ear and go, mate, just have a crack for a year.
Yeah.
And see what impact it makes.
Yeah.
But again, it's up to that individual, and David needs to make a few calls. But I tell you what, I bet you the Roosters and Penrith, who were touted to sign him, don't forget, towards the start of the year, they'll be sort of licking their lips, going, thank goodness we didn't go down that path. Now let's rattle off a couple of facts around their best wins and biggest wins, and also their losses, before we grade them from A to F. Let's go worst. Worst losses for the Titans this season. And this sort of sums up their year. Round 3, they lost to the Bulldogs 32-0 in round 3. If you're getting pumped in round 3, that's a massive concern. What's even worse is in round 25, I think, or round 23 maybe. I can't even read my own writing there, mate. I don't know. But nonetheless, they lost 44-0 to the Sharks. So when you're getting kept to blot in round 3, and then also again in round 25, there's a couple of glaring issues there. And at one point, they actually looked all right. They strung a few wins together. Des Hasler, I thought, here we go. The Des Hasler effect, he's making a bit of an impact. And then all of a sudden, they just fell away towards the back end of the year. They did go on a bit of a surge there. It looked like they were even going to, I think they had a mathematical chance of making the 8.
Making the finals, yeah. Yep.
And then, if I recall correctly, the last 3 or 4 fixtures, I think they got absolutely slaughtered every game. And it just looked like a team that had sort of was ready for Mad Monday very, very quickly. Now, Dicko, overall, what grade did you give the poor Titans?
Well, before we touch on the grading, who was your most improved?
Most improved. Yeah, good point. I had originally written Cleese Haas, and I think he was unlucky to not get this award from myself. But and I honestly, I really struggled to find a most improved player here for the Titans.
I think we will for the bottom 8 teams, mate. To be honest with you.
Look, outside Keanu Keeney, but he wasn't really most improved because it was sort of first season. But you could give it to him. But mate, I got in here Chris Randall. Chris Randall for me, I thought statistically, for a player that's normally an out and out hooker, he sort of went into that lock role, and I thought he did an awesome job in plugging the middle through.
Mm-hmm.
I guess sort of back middle section of the year when they strung her through a few wins together. So yeah, out of the small talent pool that I had to select from, Chris Randall was the one for me, mate. What about for you?
Well, as you said, I've gone. I did have Keanu Kinney, and he's an honourable mention because you're coming into grade, and then as I said sort of before, you then the whole tack revolves around. So you're doing something right. You're improving in that way, right? But I've actually gone with a Lofi Khan Pereira again, a go-to in terms of attack, solid on the wing. I think representative of honours won't be far away. I think he is playing, isn't he? Is he playing for?
He's playing in.
Is he playing for the Kiwis this week?
I think maybe Samoa.
Oh, Samoa, is he? Yeah, okay.
I think so.
So,
yeah,
no. So, yeah, exactly. I think him sort of. If I look every player over the season, I reckon he turned into a good NRL winger to one of the sort of top sort of 5 to 10 wingers in the comp.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Oh, electric speed. If you've got him in clear space, shut the gates. It's game over there. No one's.
Yeah, that's right.
A little bit of positive here. The Titans, amongst that win streak, they beat the Warriors 66-6.
Now watch that game live. Yeah,
66-6. Amongst it as well in round 22, Broncos 46-18.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 really strong wins. In a stretch of sort of 6-7 games there where they played really, really well. I think Tino coming back next year is going to be awesome, and we'll touch on that in the preview. But yeah, a couple of really strong wins there. We're going to be analysing the Warriors next, and no surprises there what their worst loss of the season was. But what grade did you give the guys?
Well, I just did a quick fact check while you were talking before, actually, on where they finished last year. The season 23 as opposed to season 24, and they actually finished 14th in both seasons.
Right.
So I was going to give them a D minus.
You didn't give them a C, surely?
No, I've given them an E plus, mate. They've made no improvement. Well, they've still finished 14th. I mean,
yeah, fair.
And I've only given them the plus because I've seen signs that they could be a good team, and I liked what Dez did. Period.
Look, the future's bright. AJ Brimson was out of sorts. Who knows what's going to happen next season with AJ Brimson?
Yeah.
There is a little bit of rumour mills floating around about Tanner Boyd recently, maybe going to Manly, which I've just heard, to replace DCE as the future halfback there. So that's an interesting one. But we'll touch on the rumour mill and what's happening there very soon. Mate, I've gone a straight flat E. I
couldn't find anything.
I couldn't find, I was like, oh, do I give him a D? Like, D would have been okay, but I just think when you show signs of how good you can be and then fall off a cliff, I don't care whether you finish 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way down to last. In the NRL, if you're paid and that's your job, you perform every single week. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but your better teams will perform every week regardless of where they're coming on the ladder. Yeah. And that's just a mindset thing. And I guarantee you that if Tino was in the side, he wouldn't have let that drop-off happen towards the end of the year, and you probably see them finishing maybe 10th or 11th and just missing out on the 8th. But maybe E's a bit harsh considering they didn't have AJ Brimson or Tino, because you throw them straight back into the mix. Brimson at 14, Tino starting lineup, and the captain. Yeah,
you feel like there'll be a better team. Yeah,
absolutely. But let's move on to the New Zealand Warriors now. Yeah, this one's going to be interesting for our Kiwi listeners. Let's run through their Player of the Year. Mitch Barnett, no surprises there. Player of the Year. Players player, Adam Fanua-Blake. Had another awesome season. He's obviously off to the Sharks, so he'll be sorely missed. And the rookie, Jacob Laban. He was the one that got the award there for the Warriors. Now, Dicko, they had, and there's no surprises here, obviously, with the amount of travel they do. They only had one extra win than the Titans, finished in 13th spot, 6 wins at home, only 3 away. So they really struggled away from home this year. Now, considering they finished top 4 last season, this is a massive fall from grace. And obviously,
absolutely. Yeah.
Sean Johnson retirement. Let's go biggest disappointment of the season.
Well, I mean, it's going to be very hard for me to give him this purely because riddled with injuries this season. But again, if you sort of refer back to what I said before about how I was sort of looking at my biggest disappointment and coming up with a player, from what he produced last year to when he was fit, what he produced this year, it was stark contrast. And you don't. So it's Sean Johnson, right? So you don't want to go into that talk about, don't play one season too many.
Yes.
And at times you kind of feel like potentially that was the case. But I don't want to take away from the career and the player that he was, or is, because he still is a great footballer, right? So, but in terms of how I looked at my biggest disappointment, I thought, Sean Johnson this season. I know it's harsh, as I said, affected by injury and his body sort of failed him at times, but I just felt like when he was on the field and sort of fit, he wasn't anywhere near what he should have been. And I actually think the Warriors played their best football this season just gone when Tamare Martin was the 7, personally.
Yeah. Yep, mate. I have to agree with you there. I did have SJ written down as the biggest disappointment, but look, I'm going to rattle off a couple of players that I thought were just like well below par. Murata Niokore, signed for massive money. You've seen the elevation of Mitch Barnett, and I have no doubt in my mind that you had him as your MVP as well, for the side. So that there's no secret to there. He was head and shoulders above every player at the club. Tohu Harris was injured for a lot of the year. We may see him retire. I don't know how. The mummy himself, as I call him, he's got more strapping. He needs to be sponsored by Elastoplast if he's not.
He's got more strapping than the chemist, mate.
Unbelievable, that guy. Held together by tape. But yeah, Sean Johnson, look, really disappointing. And I'm glad that he did get that last game of the season against the Sharks with him having an influential moment there, because if he didn't have that moment and the Sharks didn't win that game, it would have been a really flat retirement package put together by SJ, which he definitely doesn't deserve. He deserves every accolade that he receives. Fantastic role model for young kids, and he's going to have a bright future as well in the game. He's going to remain in the game, which is super exciting. Now, you kind of alluded to it, Dicko, but most improved for you.
So I've sort of gone with Mitch Barnett as my most improved, because if I think of, he's gone from a really good front rower to one of the premier front rowers in the competition. I think, gained New South Wales selection, was on the fringes before this season, got into the 17, and I thought we were at game 3, and I thought when he came on the field, he really provided that go forward that New South Wales needed. And we sort of saw it there at the game, right? He sort of changed the momentum a little bit. And, he's now playing for Australia. So I sort of think I know he got the MVP. I also had Adam Fanua-Blake as my MVP as well. I thought they were both equally as impressive. But in terms of most improved, from where he started at the season to where he sort of finished up, I'd have him now in probably the top 5 front rowers in the competition.
Yeah, huge.
So reliable,
And he
run
can
meters,
play back row as well.
and he can play back row. He can play lock.
Yep.
Run meters, tackles, tackle efficiency is right up there with the best of them. So next season, and we will talk about them next season in after Christmas or in the new year. But they're going to have again another formidable front row combination.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm going to talk about their halves for next year in this brief summary, because my most improved was actually who you alluded to before in Tamare Martin.
Oh yeah, I thought about that. Yeah,
Yeah, and I just think, like, and don't forget the young lad Tane Tuapiki. It's a shame he's got a few head knocks and wasn't able to, finish some games there. But he's almost like another Keanu Keeney coming through the grades. But next year they're going to really have their work cut out trying to find a halves pairing, because don't forget you've got Luke Metcalf in there. You've got Chanel Harris-Tavita, and you've also got Tamare Martin. So I'm really keen to see how they go next season with their halves pairings, because, like you were saying, when Sean Johnson was out, mate, Tamare Martin was unbelievable. Like, I'm pretty sure they won, 4 or 5 of their 9 games when Sean Johnson wasn't playing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's just see what...
Can I just say the MVP, right, most valuable player, is it not the goal kicker for the Warriors?
Oh, dear, oh, dear.
You know what I mean? Like,
I'm one of them.
If you're talking about most valuable player, is it not the bloke that can turn 4 points into 6 points?
Oh, they need that badly. They need that badly. Because their point differential was only 62, negative 62.
I know.
So, they could easily go back and be a top 4 side, top 8 side. Easy next year.
Yeah. I expect them to move up next year.
We'll never forget that Canberra Raiders game. Like, that was just an absolute great.
I shouldn't have said that, but I just thought, most valuable player is a bloke that can kick goals and therefore win your games.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong. Now, before we give them a grade, most disappointing loss, obviously, we alluded to before, was that 66-6 drubbing over the Titans, which was just crazy. But let's read out a couple of their wins before what I thought was their best win of the season. So their 2 biggest wins of the season were both by 30 points. One in round 5 versus the Rabbitohs, which is, nothing to get excited about for this year because the Rabbitohs were woeful. But round 14, they actually won 42-12 against the Cowboys, which is realistically the potential that they've got, right?
Yeah.
But probably their best win of the season came in Magic Round, where they beat the Panthers 22-20.
Yeah, and that was I remember watching that. It was a great game of footy.
No, and they had no Sean Johnson. They had a couple of injuries. Adam Fanua-Blake got dragged from the field. And I really applaud Andrew Webster in that moment. I was at Magic Round for that game, obviously a Panthers fan, but I honestly wasn't that disappointed in that result, because once again, we had Dylan Edwards, who's got, a spoon for a foot kicking goals, and he missed one right on the siren to take it to Golden Point. But they thoroughly deserved that victory, and Andrew Webster took off his best front rower in Adam Fanua-Blake to give some young boys a crack who were chomping at the bit and playing well, and they got the result, which is a testament to him as a coach. Now, Dicko, what was your grade?
I haven't gone harsh on the Warriors purely because injuries to key players, but big fall from grace from the year before. And I know everyone's talking a lot about the Broncos grand final to where they finished. I mean, the Warriors lost to Brisbane in a prelim final. You know what I mean? Absolutely. So I would say I'm giving them a D minus.
D minus.
D minus.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm giving him a big fat F. They cop an F from the Dizz. They cop an absolute F.
Jesus, he's
F.
harsh.
If there was F minus, I'd give him an F minus. You can't go from top 4 to losing 66-6, having the side that they have, regardless of the Sean Johnson situation. They had Roger Tuivasa-Sheck join the side. People were touting them as premiership favourites with the recruitment that they'd done and what they did last year. And to finish 13th is just an absolute catastrophe for the Warriors. That's not to say that their ceiling for next year, like I said, isn't extremely high. But comparing them from last year to this year, solid F for me, mate. Solid F.
Harsh but fair.
Now, before we get into the Broncos, which I know you're going to be extremely passionate about, mate, and that's why I'm delaying this segment slightly. Just going to give a quick shout out to Create Merchandise. That's cr8.sydney. Jump on their website to get involved with them for your business or sporting club. Mention us. They'll give you a nice discount. They do everything from promotional products to apparel. They specialize in uniforms for corporate, schools, sports, any sort of gifts, merchandise, custom design. They've got you covered, guys. So CR8. They actually made our shirts. So proof.
Yeah, do shirts, hats, hoodies, whatever.
All the merch.
Get around them.
Now, another little announcement. So coming very soon, watch this space. Check out our page. Normally we do a bit of a rumour mill. We're going to dive into a new segment there coming forward in the coming weeks. We're about to emerge with a very well-renowned person in the media, which is super exciting for us moving forward. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be talking all things rumour mill, and we're going to have a separate segment for that. So stay tuned, guys, over the coming weeks for that announcement. Now, Dicko, Broncos. 12th position, 10 wins, 14 losses, 5 wins at home, 5 wins away. Let's talk about some of their losses this season. Obviously, grand finalists from last year. I haven't actually been as harsh on them as I have the Warriors, but maybe I should be a little bit more harsh here. I'm just going to change my grade there. Look, they had a lot of injuries throughout the season. I think it all started with Reece Walsh getting cut in the eye at Penrith in that first couple of games of the season, the head clash with Taylor and May. I think that was almost the start of the Broncos' capitulation that early. I think maybe the ramifications, the attitude, maybe Walsh being away from the field, I don't know, but they just did not ever seem at any point in time this year the team that they were last year. Obviously, there's been massive changes and plenty of off-field incidents, which we won't comment on. But it's the way they finished the season that was really disappointing for me, Dicko. And I'm sure you're going to have a bit to say here. But the last 2 games of the season, you can say 3 if you include round 22, which wasn't far off the end.
When they were still in the hunt.
When they were still in the hunt to make the finals, I think they're at home against the Titans, their supposed little brothers, and got pumped 46-18, which is insane for a squad the caliber that the Broncos have. Then when it was really on the line, riding on the wall, round 26, they still had a sniff up against the Dolphins, 40-6.
Yeah, so that was the most disappointing one, rather than the other 2 that you're going to talk about. But yeah,
and obviously the Storm in the last game of the season, 50-12.
Yeah,
they'd given up. They'd raised the white flag there. That was.
They also had about 3 Q Cup players in that. In that game, but you're right.
Stumps. Really, really, really disappointing. Who was it for you though? The player that was the biggest disappointment?
Well, what I'll say first, right? And you alluded to where you think the downhill started. So for me, it was the recruitment and retention from the previous season. They've gone all in on one player or 2 players, and they've let the better player walk, is what I think, personally.
Yep.
All right? They've tried to replace Thomas Flegler with a spud from the Roosters, right? Well, from what he dished up last year, and they've gone all in on Selwyn Cobbo and let Herbie Farnworth, who's a proven one of the best centers in the game. All right, so that's where I think the downfall started. Can't understand why they let Kurt Capewell go when he's contracted. All right, he was on the books, and then they signed another back rower from the Cowboys who got injured, and who, to be honest with you, I actually had to Google who the hell it was.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the downfall is: the recruitment and retention. I've said this now for a number of years. Brisbane are so worried about retaining players on massive salaries, trying to stave off other teams, that they're not recruiting any players back to the club who might be a better fit than retaining the guys that they've developed. Yeah? Okay? That's my first thing. Leads into my biggest disappointment. And I could name I actually went through their team list the other day and their squad, and I could have come up with about 5 or 6 names. But what I've done is I've chosen to remove the injured guys.
Okay.
Because I feel like Reece Walsh was disappointing from what he produced the year prior. I feel like Adam Reynolds, again, was disappointing, but hammered with injury. Statistically, Payne Haas was well down on previous seasons. Still excellent, well down on previous seasons. My biggest disappointment was Selwyn Cobbo.
Yep.
Again, Dave Fafita. Talent that he's got, money that he takes up and is going to take up.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was excellent last year, played for Queensland. This year, shadow of the player. Shadow of the player. I thought he started the season really well at left centre. I thought he was a couple of great games. But he went back to Sherberg and then came back a completely different person and player. Didn't look interested, didn't look like he wanted to be there. I don't know whether he was match fit. Might have been carrying an injury. I'm not sure. But for me, I was really, as a supporter of the club, sort of hopeful and sort of, okay, we let Herbie Farnworth go. We're going to give Selwyn Cobbo a shot. And I was really buoyed by his first sort of 4 to 6 weeks. I thought he held his own. There was a game early on against Penrith. I thought he held his own against the Penrith centres, who were very good.
Fill in a fullback as well.
When he had to fill in a fullback, I thought he was excellent. And I really thought he would make the position his own, but I just thought, towards the end of the season, he was just off for the fairies. I didn't know what was going on. And I do want to mention, again, from what he produced last year to this year, Ezra Mam, a shadow. I thought he tried. I must admit, I did think he tried too hard. And often when you try too hard, you make more errors or nothing goes your way when you're in bad form. But I mean, he was what, 15 minutes? Oh, not even 15. He was 2 minutes away from a Clive Churchill.
Yeah.
And then
you're right, like Ezra Mam's situation. I mean, the other 2 players you mentioned, Reece Walsh and Adam Reynolds, who's my biggest disappointment. Rather than collectively as a group, the team trying to find a way to overcome where they were, they tried too hard and individuals decided to try and take the reins as opposed to working together collectively as a side. And when they tried too hard and mistakes happened, as we know, NRL extremely challenging momentum-wise if you do make those errors. It's just a capitulation. And probably some of those scores blew out and the season's probably not as bad as everyone's making it out to be. Because like round 23 and round 4 against the Cowboys, like they beat them 38-12 and 42-18.
So if I was to ask you, and again, we're reviewing the Broncos season. So if I was to ask you, coming into this season, who are Brisbane's 3 best players?
You'd say Adam Reynolds, Reece Walsh, Payne Haas. Oh, actually, I probably wouldn't even put Reynolds in there. I'd probably go most influential. I'd say Reece Walsh, Payne Haas, Paddy Carrigan.
Okay, so let's remove Carrigan for a minute and let's go with the original 3. So Reynolds, Haas, they played 9 games together this season.
Right.
Okay, out of 27. Now, again, or out of 26. I'm not making excuses for their performances, but what I'm saying is that you're not going to compete against the best teams when your 3 best players are on the park collectively for periods of time. So, yes, injuries hammered Brisbane, but it was injuries to their best players. Right?
Yeah.
Your squads can cope with injuries to your guys 16, 17, 18 through to 30 on your squad list. But when your top end guys are getting injured,
Yeah.
especially three of your top five,
Yeah.
you've effectively got no, and then your backup to your halfback or your 5'8" gets injured as well. Then you're on your third string. Brisbane will play on their fourth string 5'8" in round 27 against Melbourne, or 26.
Yeah, and it comes down to probably, I mean, the Eels are probably the only other team that lost multiple key players and probably had a couple of excuses. Again, it comes down to that recruitment and retention. Those players that came in were horrendous. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
Cleary and Munster being out for most of the season, and Storm and Penrith found a way, right? Fair enough, not multiple players being injured. But if the Broncos had more depth and didn't invest so heavily in these top end players,
Top ends, yeah, right, agree.
have
Yeah.
players coming in. And I do think Kevy made a couple of interesting calls. And when we do the preview, there's a particular player, Xavier Willison, who I thought should have been given more game time. But we do need to give a shout out to our most improved players for the year.
I think we're gonna have the same one here, I reckon.
Big Corey Jensen.
Yeah, agree. Couldn't agree with you more. Like, I looked at his, statistics and just up top in terms of run meters, tackle efficiency up. You're getting high minutes out of him. He's not. I always think you need one of these guys in every team. A guy that you just, just does his job. You don't hear anything about him, but he's always, his 1%ers are right up there. And yeah, for me, I had him as a smoky actually for my Queensland Game 3 side. He wouldn't have looked out of place in a maroon jersey for me, because you know what you're going to get every week from him. So, yeah, in terms of most improved, I absolutely, no question.
Yeah. And as far as MVP goes, we're probably going to agree on this one as well. He got the player of the year, the player's player. Shout out to Blake Moser. He got rookie of the year in the awards and looks like a really strong prospect for the future in that hooking role. But yeah, none other than Paddy Carrigan, once again was just the leader of the club, really. I think Madge needs to make him captain straight up.
I agree.
Adam Reynolds, yeah, fair enough, but he's retiring next year. So, well, assuming that he's going to retire at the end of next season. Let's just hand the bat over. He's already the leader of the side. He's not going to get buoyed by the pressure. And I actually think that's going to free Reynolds up to play a little bit better next season, not have to front the press conferences and be essentially the face of the club. I think Paddy Carrigan already has the demeanour as if he is already the captain and face of the club, so he's not going to get buoyed by that pressure. You can tell he can handle that pressure. I agree. We're talking about him for captain of the Maroons too. I'd love to see that as well, to be honest with you.
I agree 100%. He's outstanding, like true leader. Without him, especially the season just gone, I sort of can't imagine where they would have ended up, especially with those games where, the best players were out, the three best guys. But I do want to, in terms of like, you talk about MVP player when he won the player of the year, this is how sort of where the sort of Broncos season was summed up. Is he got 89, I think it was 89 votes. I looked this up. 89 votes for player of the year. The next best was 59.
Yeah, wow.
All right. So that's a massive difference between where you should be at a level compared where the second best player for that season was, right? So he's literally grabbed the 17 of them, thrown them on his back, and had a crack.
Did I hear somewhere that Selwyn Cobbo was in the top 3? Did I hear that?
Yeah,
right?
I told you. I told you. I do want to make an honourable mention, and not a lot of people will agree with me when listening to this podcast because he's a little inconsistent at times and fades in and out. I thought Katoni Staggs had an excellent season. I agree
with you, man. 100%.
I thought he was one of the top probably 5 centres in the comp. I thought he should have been talked about for New South Wales. Yes, he does fade in and out of games, but when he gets the ball and when he's on, I mean, he single-handedly destroyed the Cowboys in that fixture up in North Queensland.
Yep.
So I thought, yeah, honourable mention goes to him, and I think
He was
he
back
actually
his best.
finished
He was
second.
trampling over blokes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, and I think he ended up. I'm pretty sure it was him that ended up finishing second in their Player of the Year voting. So I thought those two were outstanding. Paddy Carrigan, just gone to another level. You know, if arguably top 5 forward in the game, I reckon easily.
Oh, top 3 even. I'd
Yeah.
say. Yep, absolutely instrumental. Now that sums up our summary for this week, Dicko. We will.
I've given them an E, by the way. I've given the Bronx an E.
Oh, you've given them an E.
I've given them an E.
I've gone E minus. Not quite an F, but they've copped an E minus. You can't go from grand finalists to that and get a D.
Yeah, fair enough.
Not a chance in the world. Not on my books anyway. But
yeah, fair enough.
Maybe E plus, But they did have a few injuries. Obviously, Payne Haas, Adam Reynolds, Ezra Mam. They all had long-term injuries, and if they can keep, I guess, everyone on the field for next season, and have a strong pre-season. I don't know what their recruitment looks like for next year, but I'd say watch this space because I think there's going to be a bit going on over the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, let's see what transpires there, mate. Now, before we wrap up today, quick preview: Fiji versus the Cook Islands. Should be an interesting game. Fiji very disappointing against PNG last weekend, I thought.
I did too, actually. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I thought Fiji were I thought Fiji would win that game. I'm very disappointed with how they performed, I must admit.
Are the Cook Islands a chance, or?
I mean, everyone's a chance when you jump on the field. It's a 2-horse race, so they got some good players in their side. The Cook Islands. The one glaring omission, and again, this is from a Broncos supporter, is Xavier Willison wanted to use these games to press his selection. So he's either picked up an injury or he hasn't been selected, and he's not even selected in the reserves. So I dare say he's injured because in jersey number 21 for the Cook Islands is the not so recently retired Alex Glenn.
I beg your pardon?
Yes. No, I'm not. So they're obviously they're obviously scratching for numbers. You might see the coach pull on a jersey. But no, I think Fiji will win this well.
Yeah, let's wow. Alex Glenn might get a run here. That's concerning. That is concerning. Anyways, moving along, let's just lock in Fiji there. I don't think Cook Islands have got a sniff, but stranger things have happened. New Zealand versus Australia, Kiwis versus the Kangaroos. Over in Christchurch, Sunday afternoon footy, 4:05 p.m. kickoff here in New South Wales, 3:05 in Queensland. Now, Dicko, if you have a look at the teams, it's very, very strong. But one of the things we briefly chatted about before we came on air, Chance Nickel Clockstad has been named at 5'8", ahead of Cody Nikorima, who's been left on the bench, with Keanu Keeney playing fullback. Bit surprised by that one.
I'm very surprised with that. Like, I would have thought that Aaron Clark would have played the 14 role and Nikorima to play at 5'8". I thought Nikorima was outstanding for the Dolphins this year.
Yeah.
And when we obviously review their season, we'll talk about that. But yeah, considering that Peter Hiku is in the centres, I would have played Chance there. But, obviously Stacey Jones, the coach, has got other ideas. And I'm very interested to see how this match. Don't forget the Kangaroos are coming off a 30-0 drubbing. Last time they played, a big loss last time, which is sort of coincided with the turnover of players from the Kangaroos. I thought they were disappointing last week, the Kangaroos, I must admit, but not surprising considering most of the guys hadn't played a lot of footy of late. They'll be better for the run, no doubt. The combinations will be better.
Yeah.
I'd love to see. I must admit, I'd love to see Cameron Murray play on the bench and they've actually put a genuine back rower in Hudson Young on. I don't understand that. It's a makeshift back row. I don't understand that personally.
Yeah, Cam Murray's not a second rower. It's as simple as that.
No, and they do it to fit him in the team. I get that, but I really feel like for team balance, you need him playing off the bench in this team. If he's not the 13, he comes off the bench. Simple as that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this will be close. Actually, I really think this will be close. From what I saw last week from the Kangaroos, it would not surprise me if the Kiwis get up.
Yeah, wow, that's a huge call. Yeah, I was going to say the opposite and go, I reckon Australia's going to smash them.
But look at their team. Look at New Zealand's team.
You know what concerns me about the Warriors? Not Warriors, the Kiwis. Peter Hiku.
Yeah.
Now, he's a glaring, I guess, selection for me. They're a bit short on centres. I know Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's playing for Samoa, obviously, which is interesting. They got Casey McLean in there. I don't know. Stacey Jones obviously going for experience with this side, but yeah, when you've got Chance Nickel-Clockstad and Sean Johnson, who's like sort of half had his feet on the couch, I think a hungry Tom Dearden and Mitch Moses are going to absolutely tear him to shreds. But look, I could be wrong, and I hope that the Kiwis put in a good shift. Obviously, they're coming off the massive win against us last year. So, look, we'll see what happens.
And this is also a double header. The Gillaroos will play the Kiwi girls before this game. I'm pretty sure it's before this game. And again, I think the Gillaroos are coming off a loss for the first time in ages against the Kiwi girls. So that will be another.
Mate, the Ferns have got a cracking side.
Yeah, so that'll be another great game of footy. Gillaroos impressive last week. I think it was 84-0 it ended up against PNG, the Orchids. But yeah, I think that'll be another cracker. So if you're not doing anything on Sunday Arvo, tune in because some great test matches.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thanks heaps for listening. Remember, check out our merch store. We're going to have a little bit of information dropping there for Movember. So stay tuned on that one. We're going to do a little bit of a fundraiser there, so let's get around that. And yeah, let's get ready for next week when we do the review of the Dragons, the Dolphins, and the Raiders.
Disclaimer: any views or opinions represented in this podcast and or Facebook and social media pages are personal and belong solely to the podcast owners and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owners may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. Unless explicitly stated, any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, organization, club, company, or individual. All content provided on this podcast is for informational purposes only. The owners of this podcast make no representation as to the accuracy or completeness of any information on this site or found by following any link on this website. Owners will not be liable for any errors or omissions in this information, nor for the availability of this information. The owners will not be liable for any losses, injuries, or damages from the display or use of this information.